This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, an absolute landslide win for Mark Carney, the next Prime Minister of Canada. I know some of you Real Talkers are going to be in the live chat right now. You're going to be sending us emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com saying we saw this coming from a mile away. We called it, but did anybody actually think that the former governor of the Bank of Canada would go head-to-head in this leadership race against the former Deputy Prime Minister, former Minister of Finance, Chretien Freeland, against another rising cabinet star within the Liberal Party, Karina Gould, who kind of had her own circle, kind of had her own ethos, her own plan of attack, plus Frank Baylis, and still walk away with 86% of the vote. John, that is an absolute whopper of a result from Mark Carney, who takes 132,000 votes and change. Chretien Freeland in second place with just over 11,000. To paint a picture, that's a big piece of the pie for Carney.
I mean, I think we all knew it was going to be Carney, but to see these numbers today, I'll just throw it up. You gave me some here. I mean, I thought Chretien at least 10%.
Well, I think she would have been devastated to hear it would be 10%. We talked to her.
I mean, at least, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. To Freeland, our most recent episode, that would have been Friday the 7th of March, and they were kind of in their final push. And you know how it goes. Like if somebody's, let me say, behind the perceived front runner, in other words, they're not seen as the favorite in a race like this, they're still going to be speaking optimistically. They're still going to be talking about their plan. She was on here saying, when I am Prime Minister of Canada, I will do this, but 8%, geez. Now listen, the focus doesn't have to be on Chretien Freeland. Let's make this about Mark Carney and what members of the Liberal Party decided on. But you can't ignore the numbers. These are big numbers. These are numbers like we saw with Naheed Nenshi seeking the leadership and winning it of the Alberta NDP. What about Pierre Poilievre? Pretty convincing win in his leadership bid for the Conservative Party of Canada. So this is an interesting turn of events as the Trudeau era wraps up, not just within the Liberal Party, but in Ottawa in general. And I think I heard pockets of cheering from some jurisdictions in and around Alberta and across the prairies. But for a lot of folks, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Liberals are ready to concede government. We're showing you an image right now. We'll get to our guest in just a second. Tyler Meredith is going to join us, and then we have an exclusive for you coming up a little later on in this episode as we talk Alberta politics.
Wish we had a thought of this image.
What do you make of this? So the Conservatives released this image for the podcast listeners. We'll describe it if you haven't seen it. It says Trudeau's successor, and it shows Justin Trudeau placing a crown on the head of a seated Mark Carney. I'm not sure if this image works for the Conservatives. I actually think Carney looks like a boss right here.
He looks pretty good right there.
That's a really good picture of him that they're using. It's a flattering picture that they're using. Was it the right move? I don't know.
Whichever Liberal graphic designer did this is some Photoshop skills right here. That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. So let us know what you think. Ellen's in our chat watching us on YouTube says, I'm really tired of people talking about Trudeau 2.0. She says, enough with the slogans. Carney has different ideas. Quit complaining about the carbon tax now. Mark Carney has vowed, an original proponent for the carbon tax, although a lot of people were that aren't now, but he said that won't be a part of his deal moving forward. He and his new cabinet, there will be a new cabinet. They'll swear in this week, and we're going to know details on when an election's coming. We were saying on this show we're expecting a spring election. Is the first day of summer would officially be June 21st. Is that how it works? 21st, 22nd with the solstice? That's how it goes, right? So technically, we'd be all the way through. We'd be good to call a spring election by definition all the way to mid-June. I think I'm going to stick with that. You can let me know what you think. More with Tyler Meredith coming up in just a quick second. What does this mean for the Liberals? What does this mean for the Conservatives? What does it mean for you, for Canadians over the next while? Things are about to pick up in a big way. That prorogation of Parliament will end on the 24th of March, and then it's go time. So let's do the same with this show and get it rolling. Want to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. You can find them online at relo.ca. That's where better real estate training starts. And check out the screen. You can see the different deals on how the online real estate courses work. They've got the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle. They've got the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle. Depending on where you're looking and going with your new career, you know that there's unlimited earning potential. You can think of all the wonderful reasons why you'd get involved in real estate, but you don't necessarily 100% know where to start or how to start off on the best foot. Rello's got you covered. They've got an experienced team of instructors. They know the business inside out, and they're available to you for advice, for special counseling as you're getting ready to write that exam, get certified, and then launch your career. They're all about value at Rello. You can check more about what those courses entail at rello.ca. Don't forget, when you're signing up at rello.ca, use the promo code Ryan100 for both those bundles that I mentioned, the residential and commercial. Ryan100, all one word, will knock $100 off each of those courses for you when you get started today at rello.ca. All right, we're going to get to Tyler Meredith in a quick second, but here's how the election, the vote results, the leadership vote results were announced. This is on Sunday. We're talking to you on a Monday, and a quick clip from the new Prime Minister when he swears in. This is Mark Carney.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, with 131,674 votes.
When we come together, we build things that last because we are Canada strong. Vive la Canada. Merci tout le monde.
So that's Mark Carney introducing himself officially, the big winner, as we say hello to a former senior advisor for fiscal and economic policy for the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and two of his finance ministers, Bill Morneau and Chretien Freeland. He's now a partner at Meredith, Bosencool and Phillips. Pleasure to welcome Tyler Meredith to the show. Tyler, are you as surprised as we'll get Tyler back in just a quick second? Johnny, we're going to wait for him. Well, listen, okay, so as we get the text sorted out there, Mark Carney comes in, and obviously probably it's safe to say one of his biggest opportunities is that polling has bounced back, not 100%, but polling has bounced back, showing that the Liberals are in a bit more of a horse race with the Conservatives when this next election happens than folks would have realized, than folks would have suspected. He's obviously got a resume that he'll be touching on, his years in the boardroom, his service as governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England as well, but for the average ordinary Canadian, for the everyday Canadian who actually knows Mark Carney or feels like they know what he's all about, this is going to be probably his biggest challenge right now, is to establish himself in the minds of voters, not just Liberal Party members that have been paying closer attention for obvious reasons through this leadership race, but to Canadians across the country. They're going to go into this, the Liberals are, into an election, obviously, with an intention of winning, whereas about a month ago, and certainly 2 months ago, the conversation was more about how to try to stop the house fire, the proverbial house fire, from actually, burning down the entire thing. If you think of the tone of where our conversations were just a short time ago, it was obviously a huge challenge that this party faced. They have to be encouraged by some of the polling that they're seeing right now. It certainly doesn't guarantee that they're going to win the next election, and the implications on Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives remain to be seen. But Carney gave a sense, and here we'll give you a quick snippet of some of his further comments after winning this leadership race, giving Canadians a quick sense of what his priorities are going to be and what he's all about.
Our plan to build a stronger economy, to create new trading relationships with reliable trading partners. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect. We will ensure that all the proceeds from our tariffs will be used to protect our workers. In America, healthcare is a big business. In Canada, it is a right.
So that's a big one, too. Obviously, touching on healthcare quickly. Matthew's watching us on YouTube, says, in an election defined by economic uncertainty, a desire to diversify our partnerships. Matthew obviously referencing this tariff war with the states. He says it doesn't hurt that Carney was the governor of two G7 central banks, including one in Europe. Matthew, obviously, he'll be pointing to that and referencing that a whole bunch as we say hello to Tyler Meredith, Meredith, Bosencool, and Phillips, a partner there. Tyler, thanks for making time for us this morning. Were you surprised by the 86% win, or did you see that one coming?
So I had predicted that he would win on the first ballot. I predicted that he would have a decently comfortable majority in his victory. I did not foresee 85, 86%, and frankly, nor did anybody. I think the way to describe it is a stratospheric kind of victory. If you look at any of the polling that was done before the actual leadership vote, and it's obviously, we should say, very hard to poll a leadership race, the closest you could get, even at the top end of what people were expecting, was somewhere in the order of 65%. And so the fact that he got 20 points higher, won every riding in the country, including Chrystia Freeland's home riding, and Karina Gould's home riding as well. I mean, it just, I think you can only look at it as a sense of people went in there with a sense of mission. We have to do this.
Okay, so and if you're like, the number one focus is not what this means for Chrystia Freeland, but it is a story, and we talked to her most recently on Friday, and you pick someone's brain as best you can. She wasn't giving off the vibe that she figured she was going to score sub 10%. What does this mean, do you think, for her future within the Liberal Party? She wants to stick around. You have to assume that she'll be part of a cabinet, probably not finance like she was.
Well, we'll see. I think, as she has said in the little aftermath of yesterday's result, that it will be up to Mark Carney to decide what he offers her. I think she is genuine in her intention to want to run in the next election, and whatever comes after that, we will see. But I think at the end of the day, we wouldn't be having this Liberal leadership race if Chrystia Freeland hadn't had the courage to do what she did, as unfortunate as it was in the circumstances that it was. And I think the only way to interpret the result in that sense is that while I think people said we want to go in a particular direction because we think this is the best way to defeat Pierre Poilievre, I do think that there is this duality of mind that exists for a lot of Liberal voters, which is they wanted Justin Trudeau gone. Chrystia Freeland delivered the only way and mechanism for that to happen, and yet they also didn't want her.
Ryu Street Fighters watching us on YouTube on our live chat powered by Park Power says, Canadians are so gullible. I can't believe we are seriously talking about voting in the Liberals again, headed by Trudeau 2.0. We showed a graphic before we welcomed you to the show that the Conservatives put out yesterday of Trudeau, the kingmaker, placing the crown on Carney's head. Basically says, Carney is the same. They're calling him carbon tax Carney. They're trying to draw direct lines to Carney and Trudeau, and it is relevant. They're pointing out he was, an economic advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau for quite some time. They're saying through some difficult years. I don't see the same Conservatives noting the fact that Carney was appointed the governor of the Bank of Canada by Prime Minister Stephen Harper and worked with him closely for many years as well. I do think that's relevant to enter into the conversation, but what does Carney need to do to establish himself? How does he do it as different than his predecessor?
Well, I think he probably needs to go out with an earned media strategy and a paid media strategy very quickly, in part because we can expect that in the period of time before the next election, which could be, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we don't know yet. But in that period of time, I would expect the Conservatives are going to put a fairly significant ad buy out there to try to define him. What they showed you in that graphic is just the start. And to be honest, he's still a relatively undefined person, right? Like, I think part of the reason why Canadians have flocked to Mark Carney is because he has the resume for this particular moment. It's a very unique moment in which probably that resume it would have done the best. In other circumstances, I'm not sure we would be having this conversation. But Canadians have chosen him because they like the resume. They're comfortable with him. They've parked their vote there. Now he has to reintroduce himself as the agent of change. And as long as he looks like the most stable alternative that is change relative to Pierre Poilievre, I think he has a decent shot at being prime minister for a long time.
So he'll swear in short order. It'll be kind of an expedited process, although those in the know are saying that the transition has sort of already kind of begun. He'll name a cabinet. People are expecting him to have it kind of pared down. I think it's Andrew Coyne that referred to it as a wartime cabinet, maybe 20 ministers. Do you expect an election call essentially right away?
Yeah, I think there will be an election call soon. We even heard ministers talking about that yesterday. And part of why I think there's a desire to want to have an election as opposed to having the House come back is because increasingly it has become obvious that there is a need for the new leader to have a strong mandate in dealing with Donald Trump. And it's also likely, by the way, that we're going to see some degree of kind of split screening in the course of a campaign where whoever, where Mr. Carney as prime minister is going to have to be able to continue to govern in dealing with Donald Trump. And so everything right now is about Donald Trump. And so the faster we get to a mandate that is able to give whoever will win that election with a very strong mandate to push back in ways and values that Canadians are happy with, which I also think is perhaps a challenge that Mr. Poilievre will have. I think that's job number one.
What does this mean, do you think, for Pierre Poilievre? Like, they're obviously, I'm sure the Conservatives to a certain degree are paying attention to what's happening in the polls and some of the trends they're indicating. I'm sure they're doing their own polling. And maybe there's a part of them that's not paying attention to the polling at all. But the fact of the matter is it's looking like a closer race than it did even 3-4 weeks ago.
Oh, absolutely. And look, do they still have a decent shot at winning? Absolutely. I think, though, what the outcome of that would look like, even if they were to win, could it be a minority government versus a majority government? That is now very much in play. And what's interesting is Pierre Poilievre is now demonstrating himself. He's admitted basically that they've had to make a pivot. You saw obviously the Canada First speech, which was one element of that pivot. The other element of that pivot is about how he casts his own personality. And in fact, I don't know if your listeners would have seen this, but in French media over the weekend, kind of while not everyone was paying attention, they released 3 new ads in French where Poilievre goes directly at trying to say, look, people think that I'm too frank and divisive. Well, perhaps maybe that's what we need dealing with Donald Trump. So that's a recognition that he knows his negatives are quite high. He knows that there's a personality problem that is standing in his way in some ways with the median voter. And to the extent that they may be flocking to Mr. Carney because they see the resume, he wants to head that off at the pass.
Fundraising numbers were interesting as well. The party releasing those, and they kind of, to be honest with you, basically mirrored the election result. They kind of mirrored the voter result. I'm referencing Canadian polling on X. Donations raised by Carney, $3.5 million from about 22,000 donors. Karina Gould actually in second, with about a tenth of that, just over 360 grand from about 2,500 people. Chretien Freeland right behind her. Similar numbers, and then Bayless. Well, pretty much all 3 of them raised basically about 350 grand a piece. Bayless, his donors, maybe a little deeper pockets, just 500 of them donating 350 G's. But what does that say to you, generally speaking, about investment or folks' willingness to invest or to contribute out of their pockets to the party? What do you read into the fundraising totals, if anything?
So those numbers are a little bit lagged, partly because I think they're based on the latest reports from Elections Canada. Carney is actually over 4 million. And each of those candidates are a little bit over those numbers you report there. But I think you're right in terms of proportionality. Look, this is the best first quarter fundraising for the Liberal Party in its entire history. And that's not to, that is in many parts because of this very energetic leadership campaign that we've had. And, Carney has raised, as I say, north of $4 million now. He's not spending anywhere near to that. He's obviously had a very large team of staff and an organization across the country that they've been building. But the fact that he's raised that amount of money means that that's money that, in the next week or two can now be put at the disposal of the party as we get set for the general election. So the party will be in a much stronger position going into the next election. We will spend the cap, obviously, but as will the other parties. But it at least ensures that there's a stability both before and after the election in terms of the finances of the party, which, given the situation we were facing only a few months ago where it looked like certain defeat, this is a very strong result.
Pretty unreal performance by Jean Chretien at the gathering. Hey, talking about how he's too old to burn down the White House himself. The guy in his 90s still got it.
Yeah, so it's amazing. The party, I think, probably had allocated about 10 minutes for his speech. It ended up being over 35. Yeah. I had been told by people around him that they were expecting the speech would take about 20, even knowing that he sometimes goes long. He took 35. Now, I think that's partly because he was enjoying his moment on the stage. And his delivery is a little slower these days, but he still got it, right? And the room definitely responded to him. And I thought it was interesting as well that, he went out of his way to make the point both in terms of trying to talk about what the identity of the Liberal Party is, remind us of the values and the accomplishments that have been part of the story of Canada, which, is interesting because we didn't in this Liberal leadership race have a significant debate about what is the future of the Liberal Party. It was largely a question of who are we selecting that we think would stand up best on a stage against Pierre Poilievre. But Jean Chrétien reminded us why we're Liberals, and he also reminded us why, even in his experience where he had such a great relationship with Bill Clinton, we shouldn't take that for granted.
Tyler, I want to ask you just about the approach that you expect. You've served the outgoing prime minister as a fiscal and economic advisor. Let me ask you about the politics of how Carney's positioning Pierre Poilievre and his relationship with Donald Trump. I understand why he's doing it, but it's pretty loaded language. Here's just about 10 seconds from last night. He's talking about Pierre Poilievre.
A person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him.
Okay, so he obviously had more to say, and he will have more to say, and Poilievre will have more to say in response, but worshiping at the altar of Trump, bending the knee, essentially kissing the ring. Is it the right strategy, or is it a little hyperbolic?
Well, look, I think it's consistent with whatever message track the party would have used regardless of who won. If you notice in the course of the last several weeks, the party has kind of been a bit unleashed in making the claim that there's a clear line you can draw between Trump's rhetoric and priorities and Pierre Poilievre's rhetoric and priorities. Canadians will have to decide whether or not they believe that that's genuine and authentic. But the fact that the party kind of felt unbridled now in making that case, which, let's be honest, kind of if you go back and look at history, in the summer, the party was making that, trying to make that message track and laying that message track. When Trump won in November, we stopped doing that, I think out of hesitation about what that would do to Canada-U.S. relations. But given how much Trump has punched at Canada, which, I think beyond the expectations of anyone going into this, I just think the party has now decided, screw it, let's just go there because they have a fair bit of evidence to work with. Whether or not Canadians will see that it's authentic is, as I say, still to be determined.
Tyler, before we thank you for your time, I just want to remind folks, obviously, that you did work closely with Justin Trudeau, and I want to show my screen here. This is his Instagram to his 4.5 million followers or so. He posts this just the other day. Says, I haven't used one of these in a while, but I think I got the hang of it. Took an old disposable camera. I think a lot of people are doing that at wedding receptions now. They're just putting these on the tables. And they assigned the prime minister to go out and snap a bunch of photos. I guess maybe some insight into where his head's at, some insight into who he's saying goodbye to, or how he's wrapping his mind around leaving, whatever the case may be. Let me ask you, essentially a decade of service to Canada. How would you define at this point Justin Trudeau's legacy?
So I think he's going to be seen as one of the most controversial as well, but one of the most consequential prime ministers, and also one of the most progressive, certainly since his father. It's interesting. A bunch of us of his former staff gathered with him on Saturday night. We had a chance to kind of spend a couple of hours just, telling old stories and catching up. And what was interesting to me was in those moments, and you saw it again yesterday in his speech that he gave to the party before the leadership results were announced. He went out of his way to define himself, to take on the identity and the moniker of being a progressive. He's not ashamed of that. He actually is very proud of the things that we've done. And I think over time, many of those accomplishments, be it, the introduction of childcare, the Canada Child Benefit, the negotiation of CUSMA 1.0, the handling of COVID, the building of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, dental care, pharmacare. I think over time, Canadians will come to cherish and appreciate a lot of those things. We obviously will go in a different direction as circumstances change. That is true of every administration, every prime minister. But I think those accomplishments will stand up very well over time.
Tyler Meredith is a partner at Meredith, Boson, Cool & Phillips. You can learn more about what they're doing at mbpolicy.com. Tyler, thanks for making time for us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, you got it. Randy in our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, Randy, says it was incredibly hypocritical, he says, of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. He calls her Marlena, but Premier Smith he's talking about. Says calling on Carney immediately to call an election when she took 7 months to call an election after winning the leadership race. Yeah, kind of interesting to see how the different Canadian premiers, different politicians across the country either congratulated or didn't congratulate Mark Carney. You had some of them that were sort of falling over themselves and talking about the opportunity that he has and the leadership that they believe he will provide. And then you have, I think it was Scott Moe in Saskatchewan. It was awesome. His tweet was basically like what you would text your buddy who won the football pool and you're kind of choked that you didn't win it. It was his tweet basically says, "Congrats to Mark Carney." And then Danielle Smith, as Randy pointed out, basically was like, Mark Carney must call an election right now. Which, listen, I understand and I agree. Actually, I do agree that Carney's got to call an election. He's going to want to get in there. He's going to want to get a seat in the House of Commons, but it would not be unprecedented for the session to begin without him there. Danielle Smith, as an example, didn't have a seat in the Alberta legislature when she won the leadership, when she became premier, and she won that leadership vote. What was it, like a mid-October, and the election was in May. So there you have it. So Randy's not wrong on that one. Super Chat Ken does say Carney does need to call an election as soon as he is transitioned into the position. As soon as he swears in as prime minister, he says either this or next week, says he would look terrible to have Parliament reconvene without him in it. So we'll see what happens. Parliament prorogued until the 24th of March, and then at that point, when an election call goes down, what is it? What are the numbers? I think it's something like between the campaign will be something like 39 to 51 days, something like that. It's basically like 4 to 8 weeks ish, 4 to 7 weeks. So will the Liberals strategically look at this like a shorter campaign is better for them, or are they going to look at this like Carney needs a little bit of time to govern, to give people an idea of what he's all about, to be able to point to some of the action that he's taken? Or is it time to just put it in front of Canadians and say, let's go? You can let us know what you think to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Always curious for your takes on this and everything else we're talking about. Another story that is not, is it flying under the radar? Is that even fair to say? Or is there just so much going on right now? Steel and aluminum tariffs about to be imposed. Donald Trump musing about tariffs that could go higher. Obviously, everybody's watching that. But in Alberta politics, 2 members of the UCP, a minister, Guthrie, who's out, suspended essentially, and an MLA out of Lesser Slave Lake, like we talked about, Scott Sinclair, who is gone, voted out by his peers on Friday after we wrapped the show. Probably not an accident. I mean, we're sitting there on Friday's episode. If you listened, if you watched it, we're sitting there going, there's something happening here. This doesn't pass the smell test. And then he is gonzo. We're going to get to this story in just a second, exclusively when Scott Sinclair joins me in studio. But first, I want to put this on your radar. You've probably seen this campaign. Our friends at Edmonton International Airport are making a very bold push for a non-stop flight to London, England. This is the YAG Wants London campaign, and it's mobilizing travelers, businesses, and the community to show airlines there is a strong demand for this route. And so we're asking you to join this campaign right now. You can check out the website. Basically, they want to make sure that they can send a strong message, and so they're looking for you to fill in this information. It's the YAG Wants London campaign. We're going to link to that website in the show notes. You don't have to write it down right now on YouTube. It'll be in the show notes on the podcast. Take 2 seconds and show your support for a non-stop flight from Edmonton to London. Join the movement today because YAG wants London. Amazing things happening at Freeland Brothers through this year. 2025 marks the 70th anniversary of this business that started with a humble butcher shop in Hinton, Alberta, and has grown exponentially from there. Unbelievable. Still, quality food for low prices every single day. Freeland Brothers has always been focused on family. We're going to be telling you through the year about things that are happening as part of those 70th anniversary festivities, but I want to make sure you know about the Family Essentials flyer. Quality food, low prices every single day, including recipes. You can check it out online or find it in store at Freeland Brothers. A shout out to our friends at North Road Investment Council who are making sure that your investments in your family, your wealth are safe and are strategically able to weather the storm that we're seeing right now from external, international factors. For high net worth individuals in particular, financial management simply is not about guesswork. It's about strategy. And that's where North Road Investment Council comes in. Their team creating customized investment plans to help you achieve your unique goals with confidence. North Road Investment Council is a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. You can connect with Marshall and Carrie today at northroadic.com. And our friends at California Closets want to remind you how proud they are to be a Canadian company that is Alberta owned. They're employing Albertans. They're manufacturing everything that they install right here in Alberta, and California Closets sourcing everything they possibly can out of Canada. They're doubling down on their commitment to Canada right now in light of what's happening internationally, in particular with the United States. Their co-owners, Cameron and Joelle, in a release on their Instagram, they say small businesses like ours are the backbone of our nation's economy. We create jobs, invest in communities, and contribute to the strength of Canadian industries. You can learn more about investing in Canada by working with California Closets by checking out their Instagram at California Closets Alberta. And you can also book a free consultation today on their website. That's californiaclosets.ca. Well, a really remarkable situation unfolding at the Alberta legislature. We were talking to you about this last week as the elected MLA out of Lesser Slave Lake went onto his Facebook and essentially told his constituents, and for that matter, everybody across the province of Alberta, why he would not be supporting the budget. Here's the deal. As we reiterated, it is it was his government's budget, which made that statement all the more remarkable. Scott Sinclair describing this budget, the 2025 budget, as at best disappointing, at worst unacceptable. Because of this statement, and who knows what else, we're about to find out, he was voted out of caucus by his peers on Friday after we wrapped our show. He's joining us exclusively in the Real Talk studio. Thanks for making time for us. A pretty crazy weekend for you, I have to imagine.
Yeah, it was. I think the last week and a half has been probably one of the most stressful parts of my young career in politics so far. But I think actually hearing about the vote on Friday, I was able to get away for a couple days with my family, and then you sort of reset and you speak to people back in my hometown and realize when I posted it, I knew some of the consequences would lead down a road like this. I certainly didn't hope it did, and I was hoping to spark a conversation. My intention is not to topple government. I think it's important to note I have not voted on the budget yet, and it's also important to note that just one vote would not topple government. And I know it's unorthodox and unprecedented to call out my own government or my own leader like I did, but I'm pretty new to politics, and one of the promises I made to the people back home is that I would do the best I could in the job, and I would stay true to who I was as best I could in this world we live in now, and then but also to speak my mind and make sure that the voices where I'm from in Lesser Slave Lake and Northern Alberta is heard by my peers here. So it certainly sparked a conversation, and I'm really hoping that we can continue moving forward here and have productive conversations, even though I'm now an independent. Like to make a couple things clear. I'm definitely not crossing the floor to the NDP, so hopefully half your listeners didn't turn the channel on me. But
have they approached you?
No, not officially.
Okay.
Just I think people, the rumor mills and social media start to take on a bit of a life of its own, and I was voted by the people of Lesser Slave Lake as a UCP member. We have core principle values in the area, and I actually think I was staying true to them, especially fiscally, by making this post. And we still have 2 to 3 weeks before the actual vote happens, so there is no reason why I still couldn't vote for the budget, even as an independent. And I'm also certainly not whipping votes or trying to get other of my colleagues to jump into my foxhole with me and topple our government. That's also the last thing I want to see.
What has the Premier's office said to you? Like, have you ruled out returning to caucus? Like, in other words, if you were to vote for the budget, and they were to, put you in timeout, which has happened before. I can think of several MLAs that have been placed in timeout under different premiers and different governments in past. Could you see a path back to the party?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a bridge burning type of person, and the whole time I was communicating to leadership and the Premier's office that I'm hoping to keep the line of dialogue open.
What did they say to you?
Well, I think initially it sparked some conversations about some of my concerns and trying to figure out how we could find a path forward. But as the week grew closer to, I'd say, Tuesday or Wednesday, I think the sentiment started to change, and then it became more of an ultimatum officially, and one that I was certainly disappointed in, because it's an arbitrary deadline that I was given by Friday of last week to basically reverse my position, support the budget as is, and support the Premier going forward.
What did they want you to do? What does that look like?
I'm not sure exactly the logistics. I think it would have probably been maybe a photo op with a letter signed with my intentions. But I mean, given the amount of amazing feedback I've had from my riding and people all over northern Alberta, I just feel like I did the right thing. I did what I was voted in to do, and I think even though it's rare and unorthodox inside politics, I think people should have somebody in office who's willing to speak for them, and I think I've done that. Now, going forward, I certainly want to make sure I'm not putting our government in jeopardy. I do not want to trigger an election. I do think there's a lot of uncertainties right now, so I think it is important to keep Albertans at ease and unified. But I don't regret the decision, and the longer the week went, you're talking to two different worlds simultaneously, and it was incredibly stressful. But I've only known people 2 years, and all the experts in politics are telling you have to reverse course or save face or eat crow, and then you talk to people from my hometown. People I've known, I'm 40 years old, my whole life, and they're saying, like, don't you dare give in. You've done exactly what you said you would do and what we wanted from a representative.
So you perceive that you have the support of your constituents, in particular folks in the Lesser Slave Lake riding that voted Conservative.
Absolutely. I mean, I have several support letters that were sent out on social media from the surrounding municipalities, and also from my own Lesser Slave Lake UCP Constituency Association. I
think this is pretty interesting. We've got the mayor of Slave Lake in our live chat right now on YouTube, powered by Park Power, Mayor Francesca Ward, who says, Scott has been working for our region well before his comment, or I think she probably, let me reread that. He's been working for our region well before his comment on the budget on social media. Mayor goes on to say this is effectively the last straw from a cabinet that's not listening. How'd you get to this point? Because you threw a real hand grenade. I was gobsmacked when I saw it. We talked about it on the show. I couldn't believe it. You don't see that very often from a government MLA, in particular a backbencher. What got you to the point that you decided to type this out and then press send?
I think it's a good question. I think for people that don't understand what happens with parliamentary process or in politics, there's a couple different streams of communication that you can take, and that was what a lot of my colleagues were advising me to do moving forward, is that use the existing ones, such as budget estimates coming up, and where we have basically televised budget debates for the next few weeks before we go into the legislature and vote on it. And we have the cabinet policy committees, and there's these mechanisms where internally we're able to debate and bring our voices about issues in that manner. Now, the struggle that I've had from somebody who's really new to politics and made the kind of commitment that I made back home is that I don't want to say it's broken, but I think there's a different way of doing things that I think most people who aren't in politics probably would agree with. And I did bring my concerns that I had to caucus a couple weeks ago. I won't get into all the details of it, but
we don't mind if you get into all the details.
I'm sure you don't, but I'm already in the principal's office. I don't want to get completely expelled.
Well, I mean, I don't. What do you have to lose now? I mean, you're kicked out of the party.
Well, that's true. What I would say is that you have you speak in caucus, and then you try to make your voice heard. And I think I did that. And one thing a lot of people also don't know about the process is, and it's not necessarily this premier's decision, but private members don't learn about the budget until the morning of the budget announcement. And then over the following weeks, they start to release more details about other projects in your riding, and you've seen some of the big announcements already. They announce those big ones at first, and then they slowly trickle out other ones over the following weeks. And one of the really shocking items for me was learning that we're going to be running multiple year deficits. And I think there's certain things that people expect from us as a Conservative Party, and I think being responsible with their money, because it's not our money, is what wins us elections. And I think I certainly voiced my opinion on that call, learning about it, and I said this is the worst of both worlds budget, because we're caught in between where we're still not going to do enough in healthcare and education, and we're out of control with our spending. Like, if you look at where we were 5 years ago for our budget, we're around 50 billion, and now we're looking at 80 billion. And I can't be a part of, I don't want to say I can't be a part of a government, but it's difficult to go on TV and inside the House and criticize Justin Trudeau for recklessly spending Canadians' monies and forgetting about Alberta, when a lot of people from Northern Alberta feel the same way about Southern Alberta, and that same sentiment where we're forgotten about, and it's not equitable. And a lot of the money and the revenue generated from the province starts up there, but doesn't get reciprocated.
I tweeted when we learned of your fate on Friday in this caucus vote, which I want to ask you about. I basically tweeted and said, days after publicly criticizing this budget, you're turfed. And I said, this is a tough look for the party. And who jumped in to comment on this but a former high-profile NDP minister under Rachel Notley? Did you see this? Shannon Phillips? She says, listen, he said he was going to vote against the government on a matter of confidence on the budget. And she says, and that is a firing offense. She says his former colleague, former cabinet minister Guthrie, didn't say that, didn't say he was going to vote against the budget. Sure, there may be more to it, but a parliamentary system rests on the principle of responsible government, the main pillar of which is confidence. And so Shannon Phillips, obviously a formidable campaigner and a master of the message in her own right, had an opportunity to pounce on her former opponents at the UCP here and did not. As a matter of fact, appears to justify you getting canned. You said earlier in this interview, I'm relatively new to politics. I know that some people are probably, real talk, some people are looking at this situation and going, that's a rookie move. That guy just blew it all up because he didn't get what he wanted in the first budget that he saw. Did you?
No, I actually fundamentally disagree with the entire idea of that. And I think I'm not attacking the parliamentary system, but I think, number one, I did not vote yet. I only said that I might not support the budget as is. So we have 2 to 3 weeks here where I think it's fair that we could have continued to have conversations about it. And one of the disappointing specifics for me was, I was told initially that the Premier herself was going to remove me from caucus, and then Friday they had a caucus meeting, and I wasn't invited to it or given a chance to speak with my colleagues in a private manner, and I wasn't given a chance to explain some of the details that I think they should be concerned about, that people aren't going to forget. That I find that extremely disappointing. And when I didn't do any media all of last week after the post. I tried my best not to escalate it any further. I did not try to whip any votes or get anybody from our caucus to jump into the boat with me. And I think that Pete Guthrie was given a chance to speak to our caucus recently about his decisions, and we were able to hear from him and hear his thoughts, and I thought a lot of his concerns were valid, and I thought that we should be looking into some of the concerns they have. And but I mean, he was still removed from caucus, and Jennifer Johnson was also given a chance to speak to caucus before this happened. So I understand that if I did vote against the budget as a member of caucus, that that would have been probably a different Rubicon that would be tough to come back from. But just the idea of speaking out against it, especially from a leader who's, catapulted herself and had her own sort of revival in her career based on the fact that, it's a grassroots party, one member, one vote. And, I think, I don't know if it's the office itself, but I think people are disappointed in that. And I also would say that, to the people that say this is the way it's always been done and this is the way it has to be, Scott, and you need to reverse your position and join the team. I think that's what people don't like about politicians. And I think that's what people don't like about politics. So, when people say I'm new or I'm inexperienced or it was a rookie move, I would say the world could use a little bit more of people speaking their mind and regular Albertans saying what their people actually elected them to do, instead of, towing the party line and supporting policies and budgets that, I believe are against our core principles as conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reality of politics now would be like, have you lost your power to truly represent or advocate for or deliver on what's best for constituents in Lesser Slave Lake? Like we all want to assume that governments everywhere will do what's right and will treat jurisdictions equitably, but that's one of the big reasons why you're so pissed off here. You don't feel like Northern Alberta, and in particular, your riding of Lesser Slave Lake is being treated equitably. You don't believe, well, let me not tell you what you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I pick up on this from your statement and from what you're saying here is you don't believe that the funding is going in the right directions. You believe the priorities are off. You want the government to press pause on spending more than $100 million, for example, to tear down the Coliseum in Edmonton. That's really grinding your gears. It seems to be a number one thing for you. But at the same time, now you go, and the cynic in me that watches politics all the time goes, I don't know if a government would ever talk publicly about a grudge or about placing an entire riding in a timeout. But if I'm a constituent in Lesser Slave Lake right now, I'm going, well, gosh, we just kind of lost a seat around the table.
Yep. I think that's a fair comment if you're following politics closely. But I think the reality is most people just don't. Most people probably only talk about politics, 2 to 4 hours in an entire year. And the people that I believe are supportive of what I've said are the people that will vote in the general election and are relieved to have somebody actually speak out in this manner. Now, if this starts to affect the community in a negative way, and there's an off-ramp here and a way to move forward with this premier to get back in, then I'm definitely open to doing that.
But I can't see you. You're saying you still haven't voted yet. You're saying I still could vote yes for the budget. I mean, they've already turfed you for refusing to promise that you won't. Like
Right.
they've already turfed you. I mean, it seems like to me now, if you vote yes on the budget, then it was like, what was this all about, and why did you essentially put your political career on the train tracks?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think you can look at it like you're putting your political career on the train tracks, or you can say, we need to reset the way we do politics, and that people should have one voice inside of there, even though it's a parliamentary system. And, typically, people toe the party line. I don't think the large part of Northern Alberta feels that way. And I think, the second point I'd say is that as we move forward here, I believe I'm going to be able to galvanize even more support. When I look at the amount of feedback I'm getting, not just from the riding, I'm getting it from all over Northern Alberta, and I haven't shared them, but like mayors from other cities not in my riding saying thank you for speaking up. So I think we have a responsibility as politicians to try and find that balance between supporting the party, absolutely, supporting the leader, absolutely. But somebody told me before I ever started this job that what you need to do now that you're elected is put your riding first, your party second, and your leader third. And I think that's an easy thing to say in theory, but what I've done, I think, is holding my word for something like that, as opposed to what most people do, which is the complete opposite. And I'm more confident now that I did the right thing, and I'm okay living with the consequences of it. The best part about my personal story is my whole world doesn't revolve around politics. I have different things I could do in my career. I have businesses, and I'm still the MLA no matter what till November 2027. And if there was a vote tomorrow, I believe I could win my riding as an independent, because I believe people if you just look on my post at some of the comments, people from both sides of the political spectrum are saying it's nice to see somebody speak out with some integrity and character. Now, if you look into the interesting part about politics is those two people end up arguing with each other on my post, but they essentially agree at the heart of what I'm saying. So if this can spark some change internally with our processes and private members start to have more of a voice going forward, and we make some changes in this budget. You mentioned the Northlands one. I'm not against Edmonton. That was not the intention of my post. I was also not trying to make it all about my riding. I was trying to simply highlight that if we're sending a message to Albertans that we need to batten down the hatches and that we have a bunch of uncertainties right now with tariffs and the price of oil, and we're going to run multiple year deficits. If we're going to do those things, then a project like the demolition of the Northlands is a symbol of us, saying one thing and doing another, which people do not like about politics. It reeks of the same entitlement that we've seen with the tail end of the PC dynasty and the out of touch people with, they call it dome drain or under the dome, where we think we're listening to the heartbeat and the pulse of Albertans. But the people I spoke to when I went back home were people in the small business coffee shops, the truck stop, and walking around town, and they're thanking me for doing the right thing. Now, if there's an opportunity here where I can solidify my position to make sure that it's not negatively affecting my riding, then 100% I'm on board for that. I am a team guy. My whole life I played team sports. I'm a junior hockey guy. I understand all that. My intention, again, is not to trigger an election. And I think that's some of the fear that's been inputted into some people. But again, I'm only one vote. And even if I do vote against the budget, I fully expect myself to be the only one there. And I'm not asking any of my teammates to hop into that foxhole with me.
Did you think you were going to get kicked out? Like, did you think, like, when you posted, like, what percentage of you thought that this would be the outcome?
I think that like I said, I'm new to politics, so people can see this as an inexperienced move. But I did think about it. I'm a thoughtful person. I try not to be a one-issue leader or a one-issue representative of my party, and I thought about a few different scenarios that this could go down. This is certainly the most disappointing one. I was hoping that we could put the genie back in the bottle with the budget and make some changes to it, and then I would be able to be a part of some changes internally that we don't necessarily discuss about some of the processes with communication between private members and cabinet, which is there's a big divide there right now, and I thought I could be somebody who bridges that together moving forward.
You referenced your former colleagues Jennifer Johnson and Pete Guthrie. I want to remind members of our audience. So Jennifer Johnson was the Central Alberta MLA that had compared essentially trans kids in schools to specks of feces in a batter for chocolate chip cookies. Obviously a horrendous comment for which she was forced to sit for a timeout for a period until she had earned the trust back of the Premier. Former Infrastructure Minister Guthrie's situation significantly different. Not necessarily a horrendous or potentially hateful comment, rather citing a lack of confidence in the government's procurement practices, which is pretty remarkable for a sitting cabinet member. He's the UCP MLA for Airdrie Cochrane, and he had posted his letter of resignation to Twitter just a short time ago. Quote, in recent months, I voiced concerns regarding the government of Alberta's procurement practices across all departments. He says, as minister, I had line of sight into these processes. I took steps to address inconsistencies, recommend improvements. He goes on to talk about a financial oversight committee to review and advise on major government contracts. It added fuel to the fire that this government is already feeling the heat from. Real Talkers, obviously, as the former CEO of Alberta Health Services is suing the government for more than $1.5 million. Athena Manslopoulos alleging that she was let go, obviously without cause in layperson's terms. We're expecting the statement of defense from the government here, but it's obviously put a lot of heat on the shoulders of this government. People are talking about the Turkish Tylenol scandal. They're talking about Sam Raish. They're talking about luxury boxes during the Oilers playoff run. What's been the tone? What's been the vibe? What's been the feeling in caucus as of late?
Well, I think probably definitely concern, and this is something that I haven't spoken about publicly, and I'll say here first is, when you think about, you asked me where did you think this was going to go. One of the other concerns that I had that I certainly brought to caucus a couple weeks ago, and also I brought to the Premier's office and leadership this past week is the communications again between cabinet and private members caucus. Specifically, I asked in caucus about Minister or former Minister Guthrie's comments, or the some of the media asking about the firing of the AHS board, even though some of them were what I would call, I mean, I'm a hockey guy, Ryan, but like Hall of Fame kind of conservatives, like Dr. Lyle Oberg was, if he's he's like the Paul Coffey of former Oilers, sort of. So he's somebody that we put on there, and I had that question, like why are we firing people that we would consider friendlies at least, or at least agree with our vision, I would think, as conservatives. And then simultaneously, why do they keep asking questions about this same guy, this Sam Aresh? And as private members, we really don't know anything about it, and it's very difficult for me. And although I'm new, I'm a very principled person. So if I'm going to defend the Premier and the party on something, I'd prefer to have more information. And at that time, I was disappointed that I was finding out some of the details from CBC or CTV that night. And I think that's something that we can definitely work on when you talk about things you could do moving forward. And then in terms of the specifics with Minister Guthrie, I think he highlighted some concerns that I think we should look at for sure when it comes to our procurement processes. And if there is anything there that's bad, then we need to fix it. And to take it one step further, one of our discussions about Pete Guthrie was, at some point maybe we would be voting him out or keeping him in. And I think everyone knows now he's on probation and he's still in the party and he still gets to sit on that side. But I personally wouldn't have voted him out if it did come to a vote. Now, I don't speak for any of my other colleagues on this. I only speak for myself. But my concern is that if I vote Pete Guthrie out, somebody who's been, very kind to me, just on a personal level. He invited me over to his house for chili, and this whole world is pretty new to me, and that kind of stuff means something to me. And the kind of, just these little small acts of kindness. He's whispered over to me in my first caucus meeting a funny joke, and you could probably tell I was nervous in this room full of people, and these fancy microphones and fancy tables, and the whole world is new. And I don't. I just have a hard time if I'm going to vote someone like that out. I don't want to do it with partial information, and I don't know what cabinet knows necessarily, and I do know there needs to be probably a divide there, but I don't want to be in a position where 3 months from now or 9 months from now, some of his concerns that he's highlighted end up being, with more merit, and then I'm in a position where I can't say that I didn't know, because then people would say, well, why did you vote him out then if you didn't know? And to me that's a tough thing for me to grasp.
The implications of his concerns having merit in plain language would be that there are some real issues with procurement, and words like scandal would certainly apply. And I would believe that regardless of the depth of someone's political interest, they could pay attention to some of the fire that this government is facing right now. And your scorched earth approach with that Facebook post the other day, and say this guy's using the budget as a reason to jump off this ship, to create some distance between himself and the party. What would you say to those people?
I would say probably that, my main motivations really were to trigger a conversation about the budget. I think we would, if we pass it as is, that, we're going to, everyone's always worried about, re-election, or even though we're 2 years out. And I just think it's just fundamentally against what we run on and what we tell people. And like I said, my intention was not to make it about Edmonton specifically. I'm a huge Oiler fan. I'm wearing a Stollery pin. My daughter was a Stollery patient there. I'm incredibly supportive of our government building a standalone Stollery hospital. But I would say even Edmontonians would if they had a choice of where to spend this money, they might not choose the demolition of Northlands. That's not for me to say, but I'm just talking about in terms of urgency, about wants versus needs. And back home, there's a narrative right now that look at all the things Northern Alberta is getting, and look at all the projects. And we're not asking for pickleball courts and wave pools. We're simply asking that the most profitable and most dangerous highway in Alberta, this one stretch, is safer, so that the 2,000 people that left there 2 hours earlier this morning and kissed their kids before they went to school don't have to risk their life in a job that's already scary enough. And I think that's a completely fair comment to make, and it highlights the sentiment, I think, from other Northern Albertans that we're not worth less than Southern Alberta.
This Highway 88 that you're talking about. I know for a lot of years people were talking about 63. When you're talking about infrastructure priorities for Northern Alberta, and that was a twinning project, obviously, that a lot of people would point out to. There'd be these horrific accidents, and a lot of them were people commuting to and from work, people working in Alberta's oil and gas industry. For people that you really dug in on 88, you've specifically referenced it in this post that went viral on social media. Essentially outlining why you said you wouldn't or couldn't support this budget. For Albertans that aren't familiar with the reality of Highway 88, for people that haven't been to Slave Lake recently or that region recently, give us a reality check on Highway 88. I don't think it's on a lot of people's radar, if you're out of the region, respectfully.
No, and I completely understand that, and people don't know what they don't know, and if they haven't traveled on it, it wouldn't be a concern for them. But the majority of my town, half of the town, probably uses this highway every day to commute to and from work. There's a oil play called the Clearwater region up in the Martin Hills area, close to my home, that's said to be one of the most profitable oil plays in North America. So it's really done a good job of booming our town again. But this highway isn't something new. This is something that former, I think it might predate even Pat Wren and go back to Daniel Larrabee as something that was on the table. But definitely it predated even Minister Treason, and I believe Minister Sawney might have been in transportation prior to that. It predated. So we've been working and talking about this highway for 8 years probably. So it's nothing new to the people in the area, but it's simply the artery that we have to get to go to our jobs every single day. And there's no shoulders. It's incredibly dangerous. I was just up there last week for a separate announcement, and I passed 3 semi-trucks that were in the ditch, not just on 88, but in that area. And I think what the reason that's such an important one for me is I'm sure everyone in Northern Alberta has a road like this, but it's just easy to identify the symbolism behind comparing Highway 88 to something like the Northlands demolition project, to be able to point out that, like, what are our priorities as a government and what urgency are we prioritizing these items? Like that, one of the things I believe is that if that Highway 88 was in, say the Premier's riding, then I believe they would have started construction on it this year. And to be fair to Minister Treason, no minister in this cabinet has visited Northern Alberta more than him. He's been very good to us. He did rescope the project like we'd asked, because we were just going to originally repave it and widen it and add a turning lane, which we're all very grateful for. And I still believe that the project will get done. But at the heart of my point was the urgency of it. And if we did construction on Highway 88 this year, then I'm pretty sure I know our government would do it. But because it's only in the design phase, we can't commit a dollar amount to it for sure. So worst case scenario for me as the MLA there is everything gets worse here with our economy. And then let's say we go to like $40 a barrel per oil. And next year we're looking at an even bigger deficit. Like, whose project do you think historically is going to get deferred? And it's a project on that highway like mine in Northern Alberta. And I think that's the point is, if we can't defer Northlands, why are we deferring Highway 88? And it's not just about my riding, it's about all people in Northern Alberta. And we're saying that we think that it's not fair. And I don't know how else to say it without, upsetting people here. And I'm not trying to upset Edmonton or Calgary. I believe that they should, get the things they want as well. But I would just say that this is, a project that should be probably deferred till next year, and we should wait until it's rosier times financially.
You were the only Indigenous MLA within the United Conservative Party, and I included that detail because I think it's interesting in my tweet. And I had some people kind of push back, saying, "Well, what does that mean? That he should just get a pass for not supporting the government, for voting in non-confidence because he's Indigenous? That he should be allowed to stick around?" Certainly not what I'm saying. But your comment maybe on what this does to representation or that perspective around the caucus table.
Well, I've certainly never.
You look uncomfortable.
That.
You look uncomfortable.
No,
I'm even asking you about it.
I think that there's a responsibility that I never even understood by being the first and only Indigenous person in caucus, and I think I realized that the day I got sworn in, and I fully accept the responsibility of being, maybe a role model or a leader for other Indigenous kids and I consider myself more of an underdog than necessarily about being Native or Indigenous, because my background is, growing up, poor and overcoming adversity. And I think that's a story for all Albertans, not necessarily Native people. But there's definitely a balance there where I was not elected by just First Nations. I have the highest percentage of Indigenous people in the province per riding, but I was elected by all the people in Lesser Slave Lake, and I'm happy to represent them. And I think my upbringing, I didn't grow up on a reserve, but I'm certainly happy to advocate for any issues, and those things are all real to me when we talk about recovery and all kids dying in care and a higher percentage of them being Indigenous. That all means so much to me. So I certainly work extremely hard with my whole heart to make sure I can make change there. But I don't think that probably these two things are combined. The one thing that I would say and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me being Indigenous or not. In fact, I would say it doesn't. That's disappointing for people who don't understand politics is I made this post. Everyone's telling me it's a mistake internally, all the experts. Everyone I grew up with back home says you finally did exactly what we wanted. And the struggle I had is I was trying to spark a conversation. And on Monday maybe or Tuesday, I finally spoke with the Premier for about half an hour about all of my concerns. And it was less about the riding and more about the team going forward, I would say, and Northern Alberta as a whole. Now, this is the longest I've ever spoken to her. And I think that says something about the process and maybe, this Premier's particular strategy where, I don't speak for anybody other than myself in there, but it's difficult to go back home and people would find that shocking that I haven't had more than, a 2 to 5 minute conversation. Sure, you do a bunch of photo ops and you attend events together and you sit beside each other in the house, but it's disappointing. Somebody, not me, somebody came up to me and said, you'd probably have more time with the Premier if you're a lobbyist than you would as an MLA. And I think that's something that's certainly disappointing, I think, for regular people to hear. And I think that's at the heart of what I'm trying to defend here. When Shannon Phillips, who is, a well-respected politician, says her comment about this is the way it's always been done and this is the parliamentary system, I would say that regular people, this is why they turn away from politics, or this is why people get fed up with politicians being elected as one thing and then doing another.
Peter Guthrie appeared to be emotional in the fallout from his resignation from cabinet, and you could see it on his face. You're a little more stoic today, but do you have a pit in your stomach? Tell the audience where you're going straight from here.
That's a funny question. I suppose I think I don't do a lot of TV, so I think I consider myself to be a pretty good public speaker. But I was just talking to my wife. I haven't done a lot of live television, so you're starting to think about what your hands are doing or your face is doing when even if you think you're speaking positively. These are things regular people think about, I think, when you're public speaking. And I am new to this world, but it was incredibly difficult the past week. I'm very lucky that I have just an amazing family that supports me no matter what I do. This is the best part about having young daughters is I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. And we lost a puppy a few years ago, and we've been waiting for the right time as a family because it's difficult to travel and a bunch of different reasons to get a new dog. And we were lucky enough that my wife's relative found us a rescue. So we actually drove all the way to BC the last couple days, and I was able to shut my phone off. And even if I didn't, you don't have a choice because you're in the mountains and it's bad reception. But, I'm starting to prepare my daughters, especially my older one, for, conversations that might come up at school or things that people say because, the story did make the news and trying to prepare her for that world and just let her know that, Daddy, you're going to look at this point back in 10 years from now on maybe my Wikipedia page, and it might be shorter than it could have been after my comment, but I'm okay with that. I can live with saying that, when the stakes were highest, I still did what I thought to be the right thing, which I think is pretty rare in politics. But even if that makes me a shitty politician, I think I'm still a pretty good MLA and a pretty good dad. And I just realized that this is live TV, so I don't know if that's sorry about the swear there.
We always say you can say whatever the fuck you want on Real Talk. So.
Okay, and I think the last thing to my point about my daughters is, I'm preparing her for this conversation, and then I talked to my 8-year-old, and earlier we mentioned the dog. And I told her this long-winded 3-minute story about Daddy's situation at work and being in trouble kind of with the team, but everyone who voted for me is happy. And she's listening to me and nodding me. At the end of it, she says, "Dad, can we name the dog Bingo?" And I think those amazing things are what makes my decision. And maybe, I am nervous and I'm incredibly emotional guy. I wear my heart on my sleeve. If you look at the way I speak in the House, I'll try and make people laugh and I'll try and making people cry for all the right reasons. But I take seriously that I try to say what I mean and do what I say, which I think is rare in politics.
See, I didn't know about the dog. So congratulations. What breed of dog did you get, by the way? People believe they can read into people's personalities by the breed of dog they get. What do you know?
Well, I feel like that's a setup because I don't know what's coming after, but I think I don't know for sure because it is a rescue dog, but it looks very much like it's like a French bulldog and like a hyena. So I don't know what breed it is exactly, but I'm pretty excited. I mean that's going to be a good. We call them core memories in our household. We love that Inside Out show and my daughters. So a big thing for me is trying to separate my job here and then still making sure when I'm at home with my daughters that they really could care less about politics anyways. So
yeah, that's probably a healthy balance. But no, I didn't know about the dog. What I was referencing is just you're back at the Alberta legislature today and you're going to be walking in for the first time as an independent. And I would imagine that you will be feeling some emotion, regardless of how you're wired and regardless of what that emotion might be. You'll be feeling some emotion as you walk in there. What are you expecting?
I think some version of awkward interactions and reciprocation for apologies for the way it went down maybe and trying to make sure that there's lots of good people in our caucus that are really trying hard to do good things, and I have some people that I think are going to be friends for a very long time, and I have some people that are always very friendly to me, and I think there is a difference, and that's okay. I'm okay with that, but I think one detail that a lot of people don't know about the actual logistics of it that I was thinking about that is tricky is behind where we sit on TV, where you see people sit in the legislature, there's 2 lounges, and then there is a coffee area kind of in between, and that's kind of a shared area where both parties can go to, and then you have the government lounge and then the opposition lounge. Because I'm an independent, I will have to sit in the opposition lounge, so that's something that's I can't imagine. I'm a pretty friendly guy, and I think a pretty relatable and approachable person, so I like to think of it like hockey, where you can square off with a guy and fight and then go have a beer with him afterwards. So I'm not saying I'm talking about fighting, but just in terms of being able to separate the job and then the people. So,
sure. Are you a little surprised the NDP hasn't reached out? Maybe they're letting this cool down. I have to assume at some point they're going to talk to you. It feels like it would be ridiculous for them to not even talk to you. But you're saying right now, 100% hard no, not a chance. You would resign before you would cross the floor?
Yeah, 100%. I will not cross the floor to the NDP.
Is that on principle, or is it because of Nenshi, or is it because it's the NDP, or what is it?
I think it's probably a bunch of different reasons that we probably don't have enough time to get into right now. But I would say just on the values that the party shares doesn't match up with neither mine or the riding that I represent. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't some points that we couldn't find common ground with. Take in point, the only legislation I've passed with my name on it is an amended legislation that was passed by both sides of the House, which is incredibly rare in politics these days, which was the adding the land acknowledgement once a week inside the House, which was incredibly emotional and special. And that's something that I'll always be able to say that I did here, outside of this crazy post that I made that people might think, like you said earlier, was an experience and a rookie move, but I'm honestly okay with it. I know I can go back to my hometown that I grew up with, and I can look people in the eye and for once say that I did exactly what I said I would do, which is try my best and stand up for the riding. And I believe I'm doing both those things.
Scott, I want to thank you for your candor, your willingness to sit here with us and take these questions. Let us know what's been going on between your ears and in your heart leading up to that post and in the fallout since. And we'll look forward, I guess, as political watchers to see what happens from here. But we wish you, regardless, good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on. And for anybody out there who's I'd love to see some feedback from other areas of my riding. I got a pretty good snapshot of the way they feel about it. But if there's any Northern Albertans listening or people from all over the province, please send your feedback directly to my email or go on my Facebook and let me know what you think. I believe that we have a chance here to spark some transformative change and the type of leaders we have for parties and being able to hear from regular Albertans and don't become so out of touch.
That's Scott Sinclair. Scott is the elected MLA for Lesser Slave Lake. I see some people applauding you. Jen is watching us live on Facebook right now, and she basically says, she's basically saying this is exactly the type of person that we need in politics. So applauding you. Others are saying, one other said, I would vote Conservative again if this is the type of candidate we get. And we've got someone cautioning you to not let the NDP entice you with their moral superiority. So there you go. We're getting comments from across the board in the live chat, Scott. Thanks for this.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
You bet. That's Scott Sinclair, the MLA for Lesser Slave Lake. As always, we welcome your thoughts, your feedback on this interview to talk at ryanjesperson.com. And of course, we encourage you to share this interview with anybody that you think might be interested. This interview and this episode is being made possible with support from our wonderful friends at UCAN Youth Services. You can find them online at ucan.ca. I was lucky enough to tour their facility just last week with their remarkable team members. And they're doing so much, this nonprofit charitable organization, helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. I've talked a lot about their Verto project, which is that 20-week pre-employment program for young people 18 to 24. Offers really intensive training in personal development, technology, and job readiness, which is awesome. Just young people that just are having a tough time getting a job, quite frankly, but they got a lot of potential. They just kind of need a bit more direction. They need a bit more experience. Verto is Latin for turnaround or for change. Really neat program. You can learn more at ucan.ca. I talk a lot about, sort of inviting you to consider a donation to UCAN, and I do invite you to do so. But if you know a young person, 18 to 24, that's having a tough time finding work, this could be a perfect fit for them. You can recommend them. You can refer them to UCAN by way of the website. And I also want to remind you, if you're an employer that's bringing people in entry-level positions, that could be in hospitality, that could be in retail, it could be anything. There could be a great fit here with UCAN Youth Services. They've got partnerships already established with some of the biggest retailers you've heard of. You can learn more about it, again, on their website. That's ucan.ca. Athabasca University, Canada's open university, and there's a reason why they've got tens of thousands of satisfied alumni. It's because they're world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you, and their grads are finding work. Get this, polling shows that more than 92% of AU alumni say they're actually working in a job related to their field of study. That's not always the experience for university graduates. You can select your path today. Learn more about the AU Advantage by checking out their website, athabascau.ca. And our friends at Complete Care Restoration want to remind you, even though you may be encountering a stressful circumstance right now, maybe it's black mold, maybe it's asbestos where you didn't expect it, maybe it's smoke damage, heck, could be one of those sewer backups that just destroy somebody's week, right? If that's happened to you, you got to act now. You can't let the damage get worse. You can contact them 24/7. They've got emergency services available. Just check out their website. That's completecarerestoration.ca. I always want to give a shout out to Complete Care Restoration. They're the ones that built this studio and did an absolutely beautiful job of it in encountering challenges. We've seen them work when we're recommending these businesses, when we're partnering with these companies. A reminder, a lot of times when we're speaking, when I'm using my voice and telling you that we're proud to do work with them, a lot of times it's, we've seen them do that work. And Complete Care Restoration, we always want to give them a shout out as we enjoy this studio each and every single day. John Hicks, the technical producer of this show. Pretty interesting stuff from Scott Sinclair. We kind of, our spidey senses were tingling on Friday. We felt like something was coming. And
well,
then
you called
sure
it.
enough,
yeah,
we
good.
felt like something was coming. Dubious is in our live chat powered by Park Power. Wonders is Danielle Smith, is the Premier still coming on Jespo's show, or is her schedule too filled with these Shapiro pods? I did see she's recording. She's going to be down in Florida recording a podcast, it looks like, with Ben Shapiro. I'm not sure. But that's kind of an interesting look, isn't it? I saw when I saw the clapback when Danielle Smith had posted that Mark Carney needs to call an election right now. She says he needs to call an election immediately. And I saw somebody had commented on her post and said, will you be back from Florida when that happens? And I thought it is kind of an interesting look, isn't it? Vamp Fashion says not being in caucus doesn't mean that Scott is not, has to not work with the government or vote against them every single time. He's just not in the club for a time. And that is true. I mean, and that's kind of why I thought it was an important question to ask him. Like, has he written off his future with the United Conservatives, or could he see a path back toward the party? I guess that's in part a question for him, and that's in part a question for the Premier, probably. And obviously we'll ask her about that the next time we talk. Some of you excited about his breed of dog. Will says the French hyena is actually a very popular breed. People don't realize. Neil says everything with the United Conservative government is in the design phase, talking about these infrastructure projects, says it's all pretend infrastructure. Ms. Katie says funding for that highway, for Highway 88, would be great for jobs in the north as well. That's for sure. Ken says you got a feel for rural communities. They've lost funding by cuts to the Grants in Place program. Their infrastructure is crumbling, including local rinks, while they see billionaires coddled. I have to assume that Ken's talking about arena and development projects, arena-adjacent projects in Calgary and Edmonton. Captain Coy, with an encouragement for Scott, says stay independent. It sounds like you have more vision and ethics that could do more good for your constituents than under a banner that may not fully represent your direction. That from Captain Coy, who's watching us live on YouTube. I don't know. I think there's obviously something to be said. I never want to be so cynical in politics that you say there's no room for somebody to just stick to their guns, to be driven by their principles, and to do what they believe to be the right move. I think that's very important in politics. And then there's also a flip side that is like politics.
It's the most important.
Most important? Yeah, arguably, for sure. And here's where you get into the gray area, and that's like, how do you define a successful politician, or how do you define, if we can call it proof of performance for an MLA? Is the definition, number one, that we identified the top priorities for this riding and we made them happen? Number two, that we had a seat around the table, that your perspectives were represented, or number three, that we stuck to our guns? Right? I've told this story many, many times. I asked Derek Fildebrandt a long time ago, back when he was an MLA. We were speaking quite candidly, and we were talking about matters of principle in politics and certain things that he would not bend on, things that were non-starters. And I asked him on the radio, I said, would you rather stick to your guns 100% of the time and forever be in opposition, or be flexible and achieve government?
Yeah.
And he told me he would stick to his guns.
Well, that's good.
Well, is it though?
It's politics, Ryan. I think we talked about this about 2 weeks ago. Like there's given, there's like are you going to be someone who sticks to their morals and does what's right all the time when they know in their gut they feel what's right? Or are you going to bend a little when it works to your advantage to possibly get reelected again or get funding in the place that you and the people you represent and things you need? I think there's give and take on all of that. But it's great to see times like this, when our last guest, when somebody does stick their neck out. And wouldn't it be great if they all did that, Ryan? If they all kind of stuck to their guns and kind of, did what they said they were going to do. And when they knew something was morally wrong or something they didn't agree with, even though they're supposed to toe their party line or represent the people, in their communities or whatever, if they knew it was wrong in their heart, if they spoke out against it. I wish that would happen all the time. Of course, that's a perfect world and it's, it's a pipe dream, but yeah. That's what happens.
Okay, so here's the deal. I guess
I can see you looking for it.
Yeah, well, I'm looking because I want details on this Danielle Smith event. So, to be honest, I'll
the
be
Ben
honest
Shapiro?
with you. Yeah, I've not paid 100% attention to it, so I don't know the details. So here's
Oh,
the
I
deal, and I
just
think
saw, yeah.
Real Talkers have our back. They've got us covered. So they got their East Coast Gala coming up on the 27th of March. So podcast host Ben Shapiro is going to be there. Danielle Smith's going to be there. I'm just showing a video right now on my YouTube. And PragerU, I don't even know much about PragerU, so I'm talking out of my ass a little bit here, friends. I don't want to get too into it. But they're promoting Ben Shapiro and Danielle Smith as the two big draws to this event. So you have to know for her, for any politician, ego not necessarily a dirty word. I guess it's how it's applied, but this is probably be a big boost to her ego. Yeah. Well, she's been doing Danielle Smith and Doug Ford. The amount of American conservative media or American media, period, that they've been doing is remarkable.
Yeah, it's great.
It's good for their profile. Whether or not it's effective in directly serving their constituents or paying close attention to the top priorities at home, so to speak, I guess we could debate that. My understanding that PragerU, I'm not too familiar with it, but they do have a podcast. I saw that they were booted off Apple Podcasts for a while for violating. So I don't know. I'm sure someone can write in. Maybe it'll be a submission for the flamethrower to presented by the DQs in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park if there's something there. But Danielle Smith on her way to Florida at the end of the month, I guess.
Yeah. I was trying to find more info on this when I saw it, like flashing lights on X this morning. Danielle Smith, Ben Shapiro. But X, I don't know if you've seen this. People are talking, X is having serious tech issues over the weekend. And then this morning, even on my phone right now, and I've been watching our stream, it's gone down on Twitter about 3 or 4 times.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to refresh my feed right now. I got nothing. I can't search. I was trying to search about, some Mark Carney stuff this morning. It was working this morning, isn't now, though. So, I just searched news on Google, and that's all that came up was tech issues, people having outages with X. But who knows? Got problems for Elon Musk this morning, who hasn't been paying. Well, it's his platform,
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. I just honestly,
he's been playing in the White House. He hasn't been paying much attention to his platform or his car company or his,
I just kind of sat here and go, what's
space
now?
company.
What's now?
He's been focusing on, cutting, education funding and things like that with Doge.
Through Doge, yeah. Alton is watching us live on Facebook right now. What's up, Alton? Says that was a really good interview with Scott Sinclair. Says, but it's really just a small teaser and a tip of the iceberg of what's really going on. Alton, you just threw a bullseye, and I cannot say that with confidence. In other words, I cannot. This is just a gut instinct, and I think Alton's right, and I do think there's more here. And I think that Scott Sinclair sat with us for 40 minutes or something like that, maybe longer, and took every question. But I wonder if he kind of held back a little bit. I wonder if he's keeping some powder dry.
Well, he's a smart guy.
I wonder if there might be more to this. There's got to be more to this, and so we'll see.
He's a smart guy, but so is our premier. What better way to deflect than to go on Ben Shapiro's, to sit with Ben Shapiro this week with all this stuff going on, right? It's a big megaphone to yell over top of all this stuff that we're talking about everywhere in the province. So.
Yeah, Alton went on to say, I just wish that an MLA would actually spill the beans on what's going on in the legislature. Says Albertans deserve the truth. Albertans do deserve the truth. Canadians deserve the truth.
We're trying to find it.
And we'll see what comes out. You guys know how fast things happen in politics. Well, we were talking about the Liberals, the federal Liberals, and their kind of turnaround in the polls. They've not solved the problems yet. They've certainly not won an election. Pierre Poilievre hasn't all of a sudden forgotten how to campaign. But the point is, look at the tone of what our conversations looked like 2 months ago versus where they look now. But things can happen quickly in politics. Jen is watching us on Facebook this morning. So by the way, yeah, a reminder, if things are going wonky on a platform, so if you've been watching us or streaming us on X, courtesy of California Closets, obviously you can watch us stream on LinkedIn, you can watch us stream on Facebook, you can of course watch our stream on Instagram, and we're on TikTok, aren't we, Johnny, as well? You can catch us on iHeartRadio,
We are, yeah.
the Mixler audio app, so we're all over the place for you there. But Jen just says, OMG, Scott is the man every rural riding would love to have for representation, a human with scruples. Brian says he's standing tall and he's staying strong. Keep up fighting for the rights. Remarkable job. And then he says, Scott, the next premier of Alberta. I don't know about that, Brian. No offense to Scott, but that would be a hey, geez. That would be a remarkable development if he was the next premier of Alberta. We'll see. You never know. When somebody's kind of like first or second to stick their neck out when it's not popular. Like, wasn't it interesting? He referenced Lyle Oberg, obviously former senior cabinet minister and in Alberta, and everybody will remember that Lyle Oberg was booted out. Lyle Oberg, his office was moved to the annex, like across the waiting pool at the Alberta legislature, which is sort of a big deal for someone that was, a conservative front bencher for a lot of years. Ambustion is watching us on YouTube, says rural Alberta needs its own party. They have real issues that get obfuscated by all the culture war BS. And if they figure out that balance on their own, it'd be healthy for them. That from Ambustion. Here's the thing. And again, I'll be careful here when I start talking about, rural Alberta does have its own party. Does urban Alberta have its own party? But that was kind of the whole situation for a lot of years with the Wild Rose Party and the PCs. Like not to a rule 100 times out of 100, but generally speaking, the Wild Rose Party would have been more inclined to represent some of the priorities of rural Alberta. And now someone will write in and say, do you think that every rural Albertan's the same? And I'll say no, and you get the idea. But that was kind of the idea, right? The PCs were kind of the white-collar, urban, experienced governance type party. And the Wild Rose was the upstart, the grassroots, the people that were talking about property rights and lower taxes and smaller government. And, through a term, through certain years, were forming and executing very effective opposition. And then ultimately, the Daniel Smith thing happened with Alan Huntsberger and the Lake of Fire, and then Alison Redford comes in and wins the 2012 election, and then yada yada yada, and then that doesn't work out, and then Dave Hand, of course, everybody remembers all this, right? And then Jim Prentice, and then Rachel Notley, and then bing bang boom, Jason Kenney comes back and says we got to unite the right. We've got to unite the two parties. So Ambustion, respectfully, I don't know if rural Alberta needs its own party, in the sense that I don't know if that's good for conservatives across the province. We've seen what happens provincially and federally before when they start to split. But it's an interesting position. On the Mark Carney front, we did pull another clip. I mean, he's got more talking about. He's talking about big priorities, obviously, now. But this was essentially like an acceptance speech that we heard from the former governor of the Bank of Canada, longtime C-suite executive. Obviously, he's been on the board of some of the world's biggest and most influential companies, got a lot of financial expertise, and that's probably the number one thing that the Liberals will campaign on in negotiating with, in dealing with Donald Trump. But we got some snippets on some of the other talking points we can expect in the weeks to come.
America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form. Look, we didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
So there you go. Like in hockey, Canada will win. Yeah. Well, I got to say, regardless of how you feel about the Liberals, regardless of how you feel about Mark Carney, can we just point out he is not saying we will represent ourselves adequately at the table, right? We will fight for an equitable outcome. He's saying, no, we're going to win.
Yeah.
He's talking about beating Donald Trump in a deal, and you got to wonder how that's going to land with the president of the United States.
Well, they're both financial guys, but I think Carney's got him beat on the intelligence front, so we'll see. But I don't know. It's crazy to see everything online. Just over the weekend about it's hard to put like a number on what Carney's worth. Like most people see like 6 or 7 million, but everyone from all the descending voices, all the people who don't like him are saying he's a billionaire, but like it's kind of impossible to prove. Yeah, I know. Like I don't know. I'm asking you, is he a billionaire? Like I know he has.
Mark Carney?
He's got like
No.
300,000 shares on some company, Stripe or whatever that he used to be on the board of. He's got some shares in other companies that he used to be on the board of. But yeah, everyone's saying he's a billionaire. I'm like, as far as I can tell, he's got about 7 million or under. So.
Well, I mean, who knows? I don't know that stuff, and I like
it's just the main talking point I see on X.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I'm like, there's nothing to prove this. Right?
I think that the conservatives are fighting for this, and they've made this one of their talking points over the past few days.
Yeah.
They want Mark Carney to disclose this, that, and the other. They want full transparency.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want full transparency? What they're alleging, without saying it, is they want to ensure. Or they want to create, what they want to do is create seeds of doubts in people's minds right now, because the votes for Mark Carney are going to come, I mean, aside from obviously the sort of the steadfast liberal voter, they're going to come from voters that are departing the NDP, and they're going to come from some mainstream or more progressive, sort of more center-right conservatives that believe actually in the quiet of night, as they're thinking about how they might vote themselves privately, that Mark Carney might be better equipped to negotiate with Donald Trump than Pierre Poilievre. And so this is who I think the conservatives are speaking to, and they want to allude to the fact that there could be a conflict of interest, that this is an entitled 1%er, this is a Laurentian elite, this is a guy with a whole bunch of money that's going to be looking out for himself and not looking out for you. Remember when Michael Ignatieff came back to lead the Liberals, they said he's not in it for you. So that'll be kind of the approach that the conservatives are taking here. So they want that disclosure from Carney, and on the flip side, I guess the Liberals will probably say, "Well, Pierre, why don't you go get your security clearance?"
That's exactly what they'll say. And Carney's also said any big financial assets he has, he's going to put in a trust and all this.
Like
so.
Paul Martin.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Paul Martin.
exactly.
His family owns and operates one of a massive shipping conglomerate, and Paul Martin stepped aside, and I mean, probably the same with Donald Trump, and I mean, you hope. And many other, I memean, we've talked about, like, we were to get into the weeds a little bit, no pun intended. We're, with the minister Todd Loewen that's in charge making these decisions on grizzly bear hunts and cougar hunts and the like in Alberta, and we've been talking about that story. Owns and operates an outfitting company, and obviously at this point they're like, well, he's not doing it while he's the minister. That's not unusual for politicians to be involved in business or to have investments. And to be able to, obviously there's disclosure to the ethics commissioner, and they step away for a time and do the thing, and yada, yada, yada. I mean, there's nothing new here.
No, it's usually a precursor.
We don't want to have
going
the
in politics,
we don't have the expectation that, like, oh, this individual has a high net worth, and so we are disqualifying them from public service.
I wasn't saying that at all.
I know.
I just said it was crazy that people are saying he's a billionaire, because I think if he had billions of dollars, everyone would know. So.
Rika says, this is gross. Rika's watching us on YouTube, says you should have to be an elected member of parliament to be allowed to run for party leader. We need to change that. I don't know. I don't know why.
Why?
Daniel Smith wasn't an MLA. Donald Trump wasn't in the House of Representatives. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure I believe that. I think that probably we want to open politics more to everyday folks with real life experience, and then we get into the conversation that we have all the time, which is like what makes for a good politician, right? I mean, Pierre Poilievre's been in politics a whole lot longer than Mark Carney. Mark Carney's gonna be the Prime Minister of Canada. He's never been elected in his life.
Yeah, I think it's much like when we know this from radio. I think when you get air check, they tell you the same thing. Don't talk at the person. Try and talk like you're talking to one person to them, right? And I like politicians that do this, that make it feel like they're talking to you. They're not talking at you or over you or to a crowd. Like, I like when they get personal, and I do feel like, I'll say it, I think Carney has that over Trudeau. He just has a more personal vibe when he's speaking, whereas Trudeau kind of, it feels like he's reading a statement every time he gets up to the podium, and always has, right? Let me ask you one question. This is just me from my brain. is Carney waking up in the, on Sussex today, or like
No,
how
no,
does
no,
the
no.
transition
So, yeah,
go?
so, no,
like
so
does Trudeau have a week to get his suitcase packed, or like what happens? What happens?
Well, so they don't sort of like tell Trudeau to, Mike Commodore, the former NHLer, the hockey commentator, he's got the hashtag pack your shit every time.
There's like a set date.
Every time somebody gets traded. I think Justin Trudeau has obviously been transitioning, and it sounds like the teams have been talking leading up to this. And but yeah, no, Carney will swear in this week or next and name a cabinet, and then. For all, I think most people expect that he'll probably call an election. He doesn't have to, but he probably will. And then we'll see. We've got some exciting stuff happening here at Real Talk in preparation for a federal election, and we'll be rolling those announcements out. But I will let you know to this audience, including Jen, who's watching us right now. She says, I just wanted to let you know Real Talk is our new favorite podcast. We are loving it. She says, great relevant topics, even for the average gal that's not well-versed in politics. Jen, music to our ears, and welcome to the family. Want to let you know that we will have you covered regardless of where you're watching or listening from in Canada or abroad when it comes to our federal election coverage, and we're looking forward to that. Later this year, we got the municipal elections as well, so there's a whole lot going on, just in case folks hadn't noticed.
And what is Justin up to? Is he just on the speaking circuit after this, or what happens?
Who knows? To a certain degree,
I can see him doing that.
He's probably
for a number of years.
earned some time off. Like if you think of his marriage has ended and he's wrapping up his tenure as the prime minister, and those are two pretty major things for somebody that's just over 50 years old. So I would imagine take some time off. You're one of the world's most eligible bachelors. You have name recognition everywhere. He'll probably charge. I've heard some interesting numbers on what former prime ministers charge on the speaking circuit. Yeah. So, it would be in the hundreds of thousands for lectures or for speeches, and he'll do whatever he wants. So probably, this is my guess. I have no insight in. This is just my guess. I would imagine he'll probably have an opportunity to, participate in some pretty high profile international appointments or opportunities. Maybe that might have something to do with climate change or the environment. That's obviously been a big, if you think Justin Trudeau, there's a lot of things. I know that there's a lot of, and I'm always curious to pick people's brains. That's why I asked Tyler Meredith at the beginning of the show, how would you define his legacy? What would you think when you think of Justin Trudeau? Some people say hair and socks, people, and they'll, talk about that kind of stuff. Like the folks,
policy-wise,
I saw some people in my, including some relatives of mine in agriculture this morning that are popping bottles and celebrating, and Trudeau's gone, and they love that. And then other people believe that Justin Trudeau had a remarkable run as prime minister, and then there's millions of people in between. So however you characterize that legacy, I do think it's fair to say that a big part of it would be, the carbon tax and action, action on climate change, or at least commitments to action on climate change. But I'm always curious to pick folks' brains on that. We encourage your emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Elias, watching us on YouTube, says, I think that Carney is probably going to be more fiscally conservative than the Conservatives. We'll see. I don't know, Elias. That'll be interesting to see. Aaron, meantime, is just wondering why you're wearing a tie.
What do you
I think
mean?
it's making her. She says, Johnny's wearing a tie. Why are you wearing a tie, Johnny? Do you have a job interview today? I don't know.
I wear ties on big days, after the U.S. election.
It was a big show today.
When we get a new Liberal leader, who is most definitely going to be our new PM. I like to spruce it up a bit for you guys, but it's only on Mondays, okay?
You're looking sharp, buddy. Alberta Girl says Justin Trudeau could make a great ambassador to the EU.
Probably, yeah.
Says you got to get those trade agreements signed. Hearing some rumblings that Pierre Poilievre, were he to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, may be looking to tap Jason Kenney on the shoulder as the ambassador to the United States. Wouldn't that be interesting? Wow. Have you seen Kenney going off lately? This is wild. This is
see if your ex works.
Former Premier of Alberta, obviously, Jason Kenney. I was talking about this Alberta lawyer, Jeff Rath, that says he's leading a delegation down to the United States to meet with the Trump administration to discuss Alberta statehood. You remember this? And I kind of had some fun with it last week. His supporters didn't really appreciate it, by the way.
And there he is.
But my former radio colleague, Courtney Theriault, says, in which an Alberta separatist goes on Fox News to talk about the, quote, literally hundreds of Albertans who want to join this effort. Alberta joining the United States. And the former Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, tweets, this treasonous kook... He's He's describing lawyer Jeff Rath. This, says the former premier of Alberta, a former federal cabinet minister under Stephen Harper, this treasonous kook once sued me to prevent Alberta's conservative parties from merging democratically. He's just a blowhard, desperate for media attention. Don't fall for his shtick. That's
Kenny
Jason
dropping bombs. Jeez.
Dropping bombs. Now, I do want to let you know, we have invited Jeff Rath on the show. Back on the show.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to mock somebody's position and take swipes at it and not give them an opportunity to come on here and defend themselves or tell me to pound sand. And so the invitation is open. Whether or not he accepts the invitation, we shall see. But I want to go on the record and let you know that we have asked for him to appear. I would love to pick his brain about the literally hundreds of people who want to join him in talking to the Trump administration about Alberta joining the United States.
At least 100.
The most boneheaded thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. But we'll get into that potentially down the line. As we wrap up this episode, a longer episode than usual, but hey, what are we supposed to do on a day like this? We got the exclusive with Scott Sinclair. We got a new prime minister set to swear in, and we got to get you covered. We're also going to remind you that not everything revolves around politics, that sometimes there are stories out there that simply remind us that silver linings exist everywhere. It's not all about budgets and scraps in the House. It's positive reflections, proudly presented by our wonderful friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. And I want to thank Brady for this one. She sent us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. She said, have you seen this photo exhibit? It said the Art Gallery of Alberta in our home city of Edmonton is part of the 5 Artists, 1 Love Festival. This has been a long-running festival organized by my good buddy Darren Jordan, and I'll reference infoedmonton.com. We're looking at their website here right now. Dara Ojo's macro photography is on display at this art show, Johnny. And check out these images. Macro photography to me is some of the coolest stuff going.
It's crazy.
For our podcast listeners, this is the part of the show you just got to watch on YouTube. Like, have you ever wondered like what a honeybee looks like? Like if it was the size of a school bus? Look at the size of that. This is reminding me of Rick Moranis, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Remember that movie? Absolutely amazing. Dara Ojo is an Edmonton-based macro photographer. Through his lens, these arthropods, these insects, become stunning works of art, revealing colors and textures and details that the naked eye cannot possibly catch. And these images are absolutely astounding. I've never seen anything like this. When Brady sent us this link, this is a mayfly with drops of dew on it. Can you believe it? Shout out to Calgary, mid-1990s. Who remembers the independent rock band Mayfly? One of my favorite bands. How about this one? Look at this little frog with those little suction cups. What do you call them? Frogs don't have fingers, Johnny. What do you call them?
Sure they do.
Do you call them fingers? Well, we're calling them fingers here. But an absolutely amazing, that's a frog with eggs. Another photo courtesy of Dara Ojo. 5 Artists, 1 Love is a celebrated showcase of Black artistic expression in Edmonton. It's been running for 18 years. I remember talking to Darren in year 1. It's amazing how far that has come. You can check out this macro photography exhibit at the Art Gallery of Alberta. Plus, learn more about 5 Artists, 1 Love, a celebration of community storytelling and representation. You can check it out at the Art Gallery of Alberta all the way through till March 30th of this year. It's 5 Artists, 1 Love in the spotlight here on Positive Reflections, courtesy of Real Talker Brady, who sent us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. You can do the exact same thing. If you see somebody pay it forward, you experience a random act of kindness, or you see something that just took your breath away in a good way, we'd love to hear about it. You can send us an email anytime. And this is all courtesy of our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Get a free solar quote today at kubi.ca. We're going to be talking about business bottom lines, entrepreneurs, and the secrets to success this week. We're going to be getting a roundtable together to talk politics again, as you might expect. Max Fawcett is going to join us on Wednesday, and down the line, we're going to check back in with biologist, remember fire watcher and author Trina Moyle. She's got her new book out about bears. Remember last time we talked to her about her wildfire experience, and she was telling us she was writing that book? Fast forward several months, it's now ready to go. So Trina Moyle's coming up in the next while. We always welcome your feedback. Thanks in advance for liking, subscribing, and sharing our content. We'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General Manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account Coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human Resources, Lena Shepard. Website design, Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjasperson.com.